It's good to see you. I am here in London, and this will be one of the last videos I film in this space because we're going to move, as some of you may be aware of. And I'm very excited about that. 10 days to go, 10-day countdown as I do this now. And I love making these videos. I like this. But you may have heard by this point, or you may not have heard. It's one of the two. That I have started a Twitch channel. I mentioned it in a video, I believe, a previous video, but I wasn't totally sure. I was thinking it through. But I have decided to do it, and you might not know what that means. And I didn't really know what it would mean until recently. And I'm getting better at explaining what it is, I think. I keep trying. So twitch.tv. First, you must know that Amazon owns twitch.tv. So this is not some like weird, janky, creepy, message board or something like that. Twitch.tv has been used by gamers for many years. It's a live streaming platform. So the gamers who play the games, they live stream their games as they're playing them. And you might think, well, no one cares about that. No one who would want to watch another person playing a video game for hours and hours and hours. Millions and millions of people want to watch it. And as I've said before, I get it. Sometimes when Eric is playing a video game, it's like the perfect thing to have on while I'm like sewing or like doing some light, internet, whatever I'm doing, email. And there's something, I don't know, sort of comforting about it. But then there are also these tournaments and like all kinds of things that people do on Twitch. And over time, Twitch has become used by other people for other things, not gaming. And that's where I come in. I've done 3 test videos so far. I'm ready to announce it. I'm ready to tell the world. Noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, and 9 a.m. Pacific. So far, the test runs I've done, about 2 hours a piece. That's what this platform is about. It's like 2 hours of what, Mary? What will your channel be? Well, on Twitch you can share your screen, okay, just like a Zoom or Skype, whatever, FaceTime. No, I don't know if you can share your screen on FaceTime or Skype. All I know is on Zoom, you can share your screen, and that's what I do when I'm live streaming. And what you're going to see on my screen is what I'm looking at, the browser window, probably. You're going to see me in the corner, my head, talking, doing things. You're going to see a chat box, and that's the chat box that you can participate in. The chat is fun, right? And my role is not to read the chat and keep up with all the chat. My role is to do this research that I do all day, to do my quilt nerd out, that I do so much because I'm, this is my topic, right? This is my jam, the quilt history, quilt culture stuff. So, I'm on the internet, I'm looking at stuff, I'm reading stuff all the time. And I love the idea of sharing that stuff immediately with you. I'm researching for lectures, I'm researching for my documentary, I'm researching for all these different projects, and I have to keep all of this information to myself and forget a lot of it, basically, to be honest. And that's, that I keep it all to myself until it's time to, share it in some fashion in a lecture or a show, whatever. And I just don't want to wait, and you shouldn't have to wait. So I am gonna share with you what I'm finding in the quilt rabbit holes in the quilter net as it happens. And my first, so I did it three times when it wasn't private test runs, but no one knew I was streaming. I mean, there's like thousands and thousands and thousands of Twitch channels. No one was like, I'm gonna see if there's a quilt researcher on Twitch. The first test was a disaster in terms of just like getting things sorted and being new at it, Second test stream. Oh, and only Eric was in the chat the first time. Thank God. Second time, Eric in the chat. Things got a little easier. I learned a lot. And I had my first follower, Belle. Belle. Thank you, Belle. And then my last one I did yesterday, the last test stream was yesterday, and it went pretty great. And Heather, one of my dearest friends in the whole wide world, she dropped in to see what was what. And I asked her, I was like, this is Heather for you. I asked her, I was like, well, what do you think? You know, I mean, it's really fun. And it was so fun. Like what I found yesterday. And I just like let my fingers do the clicking and found all this cool quilt stuff and other things. Anyway, go back and watch it. But I was like, Heather, you know, what do you think? Like, you think like it's kind of fun, right? Like it's kind of cool. Like I think people are going to like it. Maybe, what do you think? And she was like, I think a niche of people will like it. I mean, she's right. She's right. Some people will not like it because it's, you know, but here's the thing. The reason I bring it all up is because I want you to check it out, but also because it's really the best way I can keep you company, because these are really long videos, so you can have me on in the background and not pay attention. I would say if I were sewing and there was somebody that I really liked, you know, some cool, you know, quilt researcher chick who was just hilarious and like funny and caring and compassionate and drop dead gorgeous, just like, you know, and she saves the children, and she, you know, if there was somebody like that was doing this, you know, Twitch channel, like I would love to have that on in the background while I was sewing, you know, and glance up every once in a while and check out what she's found and put something in the chat, or, you know. So that's what's going on. It's a way to keep you company that is more often, right, and fun for the quilt people out there. Because I really do like making quilt content. That's really, really good. And I'm looking online and researching all the time anyway. So why not share it with you in real time, where I can say dumb things and not edit them out, even though I would really want to. That will happen. It will absolutely happen. And really, there's nothing I can do about it, because I am a human being and I will say dumb things. Terrifying. Anyway. Yeah. Okay. Well, today in celebration of the Twitch channel, sorry, I have many things on my desk. In celebration, in preparation for the Twitch, I'm gonna do some quilt content today. I'm gonna do like an old school book dipping video. You know, I try lots of things. I'm feeling my way around the internet. I'm feeling my way around 2021. I'm feeling my way around. So this book, sort of a catalog book, is pretty old. It's a bit grubby at this point. This is a catalog from 1991. It's called Quilts, the permanent collection at the National Quilt Museum in Paducah, Kentucky. So I'm going to read to you. Oh, and this is my mother's signature. All right. It says Mary Ann Fawn's 1991, Paducah, Kentucky. I think it's because she wants to get this book back. I'm in London, sorry. So I'll give it back to her. But then she'll give it back to me because she's going to give me all her quilt books when she passes away. That's pleasant. So Quilts. Okay, yeah. Quilts, the permanent collection. MAQS. Okay, now. I'm so sorry. Museum of... Okay, they changed the name. Yeah, they changed the name. It's called the National Quilt Museum now. But it was the Museum of the American Quilters Society. I think the name change was good. But that's why it says MAQS on the front. So the deal is this. Paducah, Kentucky is a very famous town in the world of quilts. There's a big quilt show there every year. And there's been a big quilt show every year since, I think, the mid-90s. We'll check that. Meredith and Bill Schroeder amazing people. They started the show and the AQS, American Quilters Society. All of this stuff is happening like in the 90s when quilts were really becoming like, I mean, in the 80s, quilts were starting to just like, I don't know, they became a monster after the bicentennial, you know, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, like the quilt industry as we know it, and the quilt world as we know it, like these were the days where that stuff was happening. And Meredith and Bill Schroeder started the Paducah Quilt Show. And I believe, I mean, American Quilters Society, an organization dedicated to promoting the accomplishments of today's quilters. So that, yeah, the early 80s, okay, right. 84 was AQS, okay. They were collecting, yeah, activities for, so they decided there ought to be a museum. It opened in 1991, and this is the catalog. So I'm going to show you a few of the quilts that are in this catalog that were in the original seed collection for the Quilt Museum in Kentucky. It's a really interesting book. I have it. I didn't bring many books with me, many quilt books or any books to London this time. Last time I was here, I brought several stacks of books because I was doing book dipping videos like pretty regularly as I could do it. And I was like, well, I got to have quilt books to do book dips on. I'm not going to buy a whole bunch of books while we're there. I'll just take some books. I mean, books are as heavy as stones. I was lugging around these books, and we moved. I mean, I didn't do that this time, but I'm using this book in some lectures that I'm doing lately. So I was like, oh, I'll just take one book to London this time. And this was a really good one to take because the pictures of the quilts in here are fascinating. I mean, the quilts that are represented here are fascinating. I'll drop in pictures of these quilts as I talk about them because I'm not going to just shove them up against the camera. That will never do. What's interesting about this collection is you have quilts that are very traditional, like Bed of Peonies by Karen Matheson. I know I said that wrong, and she's very famous. No, I'm thinking of Judy. Anyway, Bed of Peonies. And, you know, these traditional quilts, Paducah's, when I think of the Paducah Quilt Show, I think of, you know, seeing some of the most beautiful, you know, traditional and contemporary quilts like ever. The winners at Paducah, of course, the Big Quilt Show is a contest too. There are, you can enter various contests. And I mean, if you win Best in Show at Paducah, you're like knighted basically by the quilt community. And I mean, I've seen, it's interesting. It's an interesting show. People are, you know, putting their noses up to the quilt, you know, sort of not on them, but pretty close to them, counting the number of stitches per inch. And it's, you know, it's like the, what's the big horse race? The Derby, the Kentucky Derby. Oh, Kentucky Derby. Well, that makes sense. It's the Kentucky Derby of quilt contests and quilt shows. I mean, yeah. You have traditional quilts, like Grandmother's Engagement Ring, okay, by Arlene Statz. This quilt is very beautiful and very perfect, and it represents, you know, traditional quilts in the quilt, you know, canon. But what happens when, you know, the reason I like this book so much is it really has, because of the time it was produced and the quilts that are in this collection by 1991, is you really see, you know, you see the rise of the art quilt and the contemporary quilt. I would say contemporary quilt. Well, anyway, the quilts that are in this collection at the beginning, collected between 1984 and 1991, there's some stuff happening to quilts at that time, stylistically, and it's fascinating to see some of that occurring right before your very eyes. This quilt, The Blade by Doreen Speckman, I mean, it's fabulous. It's so great. The late Doreen Speckman, she passed away too young, very much too young. I would consider this a contemporary quilt. It's a traditional quilt that has been, you know, adapted, altered, changed slightly. It maintains its traditional elements, but you know, wow, okay, you would not see this kind of quilt being made in 1870 for a number of reasons. The graduated color across the quilt, the way she's sort of treating the stars can be named many things, but she's sort of treating them almost as though, there's a transparency to the fabric, right? There's the green, the purple. It just, these things seem to float on top of each other, or almost as though they're made of lucite or something like that. Still has sashing, still has cornerstones. It's set on point. There's a lot about it that just is traditional. But then there's this dimension to it that is definitely not. Another example here is Corona 2 by Carol Breyer Fallert. This quilt is ridiculous. This quilt is very beautiful. I got to see it at the Quilt Museum there in Paducah a couple years ago on a quilt folk trip, and I super cried because it's very, very beautiful, and it's very much a quilt of its time, or a quilt of our time. There are no blocks. The medallion, if you will, is offset. The colors of the fabric, the artist, the quilter, Carol, is treating them like paint, basically. She's using them, or to my eye, the fabrics look more like paint than fabrics at all. And it's just the way it moves, it's just a different beast, right, than the grandmother's wedding ring, and this is a different thing. Yeah, and the way that I heard the story from my mom that this quilt won Best in Show that year, I think. That year? No, 89. Sorry, 89. And when it won Best in Show, it was a scandal. The main, the meat of the scandal, as I understand it from Mom, is that it was the first quilt to win Best of Show at Paducah that was machine quilted. Yeah, machine quilted. First one. And Mom said that women just sat down on the curb and wept. And people were they left AQS. They tore up their membership cards, because this was it was over, Quilts were over, and they were being made by robots, so it was done. Why even try? Because that's what happens when, technology changes, and some people are this is awesome. Some people are tearing up their membership cards to things, and there's a little bit of both, right? And people might feel both things, but then you kind of can't blow against the wind on a lot of this stuff. What's interesting about this quilt is, she quilted this on her domestic machine. It's amazing. It's an amazing quilt for all of the reasons that an amazing quilt is amazing. The design, the execution, and the piecing, and then the quilting. It's she should win Best in Show because she did that. That is a different sort of quilt, right? And a different moment in quilt history. It's very interesting. Distant Closeness. This is an interesting quilt. Solveig Ronquist. I might be pronouncing that word Solveig. I don't know if the G is silent or I'm not sure. Ms. Ronquist. This is very interesting. Quilts that are considered art quilts. The easiest way, or the simplest way to delineate between an art quilt and a quilt is that an art quilt is made for the wall, not for the bed. And so if you make a quilt that is 75 by 50 and it hangs, horizontally, horizon being a very good word to invoke for this quilt, it's an art quilt. It's an art quilt, right? It's made for the wall. It's never intended to be on a bed. And so that this would win, this didn't necessarily win Best of Show. That is very important to note. It's just part of the collection. But that a quilt collection would be including, a major quilt collection would be including art quilts, in that 1984 to 1990, 1990 time period is well, art quilters, well done, because you've entered you've pierced the bubble of the traditional quilt world, and you are now being accepted in these quilt circles, right? In these fancy pants circles. Yeah, wow. Looking back on Broken Promises, Don Amos. Yeah, wow. I mean, that's an early pictorial, very different style. I mean, very different style when you compare some of these traditional quilts. I'll show you number 44, A Midwinter's Night Dream, Nancy Ann Sobel. I mean, this is an interesting case. You know, it's a quilt that just could not have been made, you know, in the early 20th century or the mid 20th century. I mean, the reason that I say that is because, you know, the fabrics that were available in the 1980s and the 90s, there were so many more that were available at that point because the quilt industry was the thing, and the interest in quilt making was so high. There was so much of it, and the industry just sort of grew up around it. I mean, it really, you know, media, you know, television shows, how-to television shows, all kinds of things, the internet eventually, of course, but there was this huge demand for quilt supplies, right? That led to a lot of design changes. And then also, you know, what I think as I look at this particular quilt, I don't know for sure. She might have hand cut all of those pieces, all of those sort of very delicate, lacy, snowflake looking pieces. But I suspect that she was using some tools, you know, some, you know, rotary cutting blades or X-Acto knives, or, you know, different tools and notions and supplies that helped her achieve some of those things. I mean, quilts that were made before rotary cutters and X-Acto knives and rotary cutting mats and rulers and templates and all this stuff, definitely they were pretty intricate, you know, often. But when you've got, like, I mean, they weren't using lasers probably at this point, but, you know, when you think about all, you know, the long arming capability we have, you think about really specific tools that have been manufactured in the past 30 years or so, you know, you can achieve different things if you have these different tools. And so quilts also changed as time went on in America and elsewhere because you had cool, like, gear. The gear changed, you know, the gear shifted, if you will. Just a couple more. I really like this Terrarium. I'll do a speed round. Terrarium by Marion Hoyk. Let's see if I know any superstars. Oh, Libby Lehman, the late Libby Lehman, star-crossed, so great. Monica Calvert, Neon Nights. Monica was the woman who won the Great American Quilt Contest in 86 or 87, I think. In there, the contest put on by Land's End and 3M, Scotchgard. She won the grand prize. She was from California and she won the grand prize in American quilt history. It's a really interesting moment. I think it's my favorite period now. I was all about the 70s, you know. I think like the less well, I shouldn't say the less looked at. I mean, what does that even mean? But like the periods of time that I did not initially find myself very drawn to when I was like, I want to know about this story of quilts in America. I was all about like the bicentennial, of course, like that whole moment. And then the Modern Quilt Guild, you know, moment. And I was like, about art quilts. I was like, oh no, well. But now it's like the 60s, yeah, before the bicentennial, and the 80s, right after the bicentennial. That's what's hot for me right now. So this book is like chef's kiss. A little quilt content for you. If you liked this video, if you like this kind of video, you will like my Twitch stream. I guarantee you. You will. Well, I can't guarantee it. Heather said yesterday, it's a niche. I'm kind of surprised I'm going to be doing it at all, but I have fun, and it's different. It's different than just talking to the void. I'm talking to you. I will be talking to you if you drop in and join the chat, or not. You don't have to join the chat. You can just watch, and I'll keep you company. I dipped. I feel like I did it. I dipped in a book. Be well. Take care of yourself. See you on Twitch.